Assalamu alaikum ji. Um, so in this lecture or tutorial, I'm going to talk about all the functions and definitions that we have done so far in Excel. And this is mainly targeted for those students who were appearing for their November exams and could not attend the classes uh, when the academic year started. So I will talk about all the functions and definitions that we have done so far in Excel. And my suggestion to you all would be that once you go through this lecture, I'm sure you already have those exercises, the practice exercises that I have shared with all my students via email. And so after going through this tutorial, I think you should practice those uh, activity files. And if you don't have those files, you should get in touch with me and I will transfer those files to you or send them or share them, whatever the case may be. But you need to practice before the midterms. All right, so I'm going to divide this video. I just don't want it to be one whole video which covers all the functions. So I'm going to cut it down to small sections in which I'll be covering various functions. So whatever or no matter how many parts do I make, you need to go through all of them. So let's get started. All right. So basic introduction about this interface of Excel. On the very top, you have the title bar. Then we have the menu tabs, or let's say the menu bar. And right underneath the menu bar, we have this gray section in which we have different options. This is actually called a ribbon. Okay, I'm using the technical verbiage so that if that word or term is used in the exam, you should be aware of all the options and settings. So you have this ribbon in which you have certain option groups. For example, you have a clipboard and you have certain options related to clipboard. The advanced options for clipboard can be accessed by clicking on this icon. All right. And so is like the case for the font option group. They are divided by a line, as you can see. The advanced options for font can be accessed through this icon. And we have alignment, we have number, and so we have different option groups in each menu tab that we have. So you're not required to, get to know every button or icon, but basic functionality or options you should know. And during this course, we will be covering the basic functionalities which are required to solve your exams or activities. Okay, so underneath the ribbon, we have the formula bar and the name box. This is actually the name box. And in the formula bar, we actually tend to write our functions or formulas. Underneath that, we have the columns. We have the columns in vertical um, position. So we have A, B, and we have so many columns other than this as well. Okay, on to the right hand side, we have the rows. These are actually the rows. And whatever the intersection of a row and a column is, for example, if I click on this cell has the address as B2. How do I know that? Because it is actually the intersection of a column and the row. So the column is B and the row is 2. So this particular cell is actually B2. And as you can see, this is actually presented in the name box as well. Okay, so underneath this, we have this particular sheet, which is labeled as sheet 1. So this is how we get to know that there's only one sheet in this workbook. Always remember that you can make multiple sheets in the same workbook if you are to apply functions or do something with your workbook. So you can add more sheets if you want. You can right click and get to see more options regarding this sheet. You can delete this, you can rename it, you can copy it or move it, right? You can even give it a different color if you want. Okay, so if you click on this plus icon, you can add more sheets to your workbook. Coming on to the right hand side, we have the scroll bar, right? This is the horizontal scroll bar. and onto the right hand side, extreme right hand side, we have the vertical scroll bar. Okay, underneath this we have the zoom toolbar, so we can zoom out our workbook or sheet, and we can zoom into our workbook or sheet. You can also use the slider to make a quick zoom in or zoom out on your sheet. Now, let's get on with the functions. This file can be shared with you. This file can be sent to you if you want it. So what you need to do is uh, go through the definitions which are written and also try to apply that concept in your activities. So talking about the first four basic functions or formulas, we have sum, division, subtraction, and multiplication. Okay, so this is basically to add two cell values, this is to divide, this is to subtract, and this is to multiply. So let's take another sheet and let's take a sample data. For example, I'm going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm going to reverse the order here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So for example, if I have to calculate the sum of these two cells, or let's say the whole um, number of cells or range, so what we can do, we want the result to be displayed in F3. As you can see, this intersection represents the column F and the row 3. So in order to write a function or a formula in Excel, you always start with an equals to sign. Since we are talking about sum right now, so we type in sum, we open up the bracket, and now you get to see the requirements of the function. And whichever the first requirement is, or the current requirement is of the function, that will appear in bold. Okay, as you can see, it says number 1. So you need to specify a number. We can type the number out, but this is not about typing the numbers yourself. It is all about referring to particular cells. For example, if I want to calculate the sum of B3, comma, now as you can see, the number 2 is highlighted. So the second requirement is I need to give another number so that the function of sum or adding the values can be applied. So I will specify the second number as C3. Now I can keep on adding more numbers. The only thing that I have to do is put in a comma, and I can add more numbers. Okay, I can do it one by one, or I can hold down Control key on my keyboard and select different specific cells to add the values up. Now please note that I'm not typing in the values, I'm just giving the cell references. So whatever the value will be in those cells, they will automatically be summed up or added to my calculation. So when I press enter, although I need to close the bracket, but in Microsoft Excel, there is a feature of autocorrect or autocomplete. Now, this particular function is just one function. So when you open up a bracket, the rule is that you need to close the bracket as well. So you opened up one bracket and you need to close one bracket as well. Although this function does not have any problems in it, so I can close as many brackets as I want, because when I press enter, the Microsoft Excel will identify the error and it will try to fix it and says that we find a typo in your formula and try to correct to it. So basically what you see is the function is remaining the same, only the number of brackets are reduced to 1. So this will only happen if the function that you have typed does not have any errors. So you just simply click on yes to find out the total. So whatever the cell values or whatever the cell references are, whatever the values they have, they are basically being summed up. Now let's check. The answer came out to be 21, I guess. So 1 plus 4 is 5, plus 3 is 8, plus 3 is 11, plus 4 is 15, plus 5 is 20, and plus 1 is 21. And this is exactly what we had. Okay, so this is how you apply the sum function. You can also specify some range, or let's say a range of values. So the range The concept behind the range is that it starts from a particular cell and it ends at a particular cell. So in this particular range that we have selected, we just clicked and drag the values. Okay, so we have selected the cells which had values in them, and the cells are starting from B3 to B7. Now we don't have to restrict ourselves to just one column. We can actually select as many columns and rows as we want in our range. Now, if you can see, now this range is basically starting from B3 and ending at C7. So I need to close the bracket and it will add those values up. And this is basically 30. So 1 plus 2 plus 3 is basically 6 plus 4, 10, 15, and 15 on the other side. So that makes it 30. So the sum is applied. Okay. So remember, sum can be applied to specific cells. You need to hold down control and select those specific cells, or it can also be applied to a range of values. Okay, just like in this case, B3 to C7 is basically a range. I can specify this range. I can hold down control to select another range. Okay, and if I select this particular cell, although it's empty, but again, this is also considered to be a part of my function, which is F8. Once I press enter, this is 30, which is actually the total of these values. Now, if I add a value in F8, let's say I'm going to add 20 here, this will automatically add up to my total. Why? Because F8 was previously included in the function. So now if I add a value in F8, it will automatically be added to this particular function as well, or the answer. So the answer should change to 50. So when I press enter, this answer changes to 50 because F8 is already present in this particular range. So I think it's pretty basic. In order to have a sum of different cells, specific cells, a range and a specific range or multiple ranges, you can do that by applying the sum function. Moving on to another function which is called, which is basically the division. Division is simply done by no function but a formula. And the difference between a function and a formula is that the formula is basically an arithmetic option or an arithmetic operation. So arithmetic operations are basically when you want to add the sign symbols. Let's say plus, minus, divide, and star for multiplication. So you just simply select a cell, you put in a forward slash, and you select another cell. So basically B4, the contents of B4 are going to be divided by C6. So that is basically 2 divided by 2 because the values in these particular cells is 2. So when I press enter, the answer comes out to be 1. That means that this particular cell is basically being divided by C6 and the answer is calculated over here in F3. I hope this is clear. Now moving on, if we talk about, similarly, if we talk about subtraction, you need to select a specific cell, put in a minus sign, and you select a different cell. So this is now C3 minus C6. This is just a cell reference. So whatever value is there in C3, from that value, the value of C6 is going to be subtracted. So basically, as you can see, this value is going to be subtracted. So the answer comes out to be 3. All right. Pretty basic, pretty straightforward. So now let's talk about multiplication. Similarly, as you have done the division and as you have done the subtraction, the multiplication is applied in the similar manner. You have to go for a formula. So you start off the function or the formula with an equals to sign always. And always remember that equals to is just used once. So it's in the start whenever you want to start a function or a formula. Equals to, you specify a cell, you put in a star to multiply, and you select a different a cell. You may add more cells if you want, but all you need to do is put in a star again, and you can select more cells. So 4 into 2 into 4 is actually 32, which is actually 4 into 4 is 16, and 16 into 2 is 32. Or 4 into 2 is 8, and 8 into 4 is 32. So you get the answer by applying star, and multiplication is applied. So in this particular part, I have covered four basic functions: sum, division, subtraction, and multiplication. I'll see you in the other part, in which I'll be covering further functions or formulas of Excel. Thank you.